You know summer has arrived when you're able to wear a t-shirt and shorts and not freeze to death, and when you start seeing all the major blockbusters popping up into theaters. And a lot of you may recall that I gave a pretty favorable review to the 2012 reboot of the Spider-Man franchise, kind of praising it on its more science-oriented story, as well as distancing itself from some of the camp that we came to expect from the Raimi trilogy, as well as bringing back some elements that were kind of important to the character of Spider-Man that Raimi just didn't really get right. So, with this next offering from Sony, there were things I liked, and some things that I didn't like. I don't really see this film so much as a step forward or a step backward, but more of a step to the side. Now, I was pretty worried going into this film, given that the advertising campaign said, oh, it's got 3 villains, Rhino, Goblin, and Electro. And I thought they were going to be making the same mistake they made with Spider-Man 3 from the Raimi trilogy, where they basically had, like, Sandman and Venom, except Venom was only brought in at the very end and just not enough development. I was worried that they were basically making the same mistake. And, for the most part, it's not that bad in how they handled the villains, but one of them was going to get the shaft. The one that gets the shaft was Rhino, since he basically acts as more or less a tease at the end of the film, similar to how at the end of The Incredibles you see the Underminer come out in the middle of the city. That's kind of Rhino's role. It was basically a trailer tease. That's what his character was for. However, the film did a really good job handling Electro and, well, Harry Osborn very well. Not so much the Green Goblin, in my opinion. Like I said, they do a good job with Electro and Harry Osborn. I mean, when you see Max Dillon before he transforms, you get a good idea of his personality, you get a good idea about his hang-ups. And, to be honest, I did find him kind of creepy before he became the villain, mostly because of how obsessed he got with Spider-Man. Basically, they did a really good job kind of exploring the arc that both Electro and Harry Osborn go through, kind of the idea of being thrown away, being ignored, being tossed to the side. That was kind of an underlying theme of the entire film. That said, while they did a good job with Harry Osborn, the Goblin scenes, or I guess the Green Goblin scene, felt kind of like an afterthought. It felt kind of rushed and just felt kind of tacked on because they literally have the Green Goblin appear right after Spider-Man already had and finished his big climactic battle against Electro, and so having that just felt like it just felt rushed. That's the best way to describe it. The whole final fight at the end of the film and just the final moments of the film really felt kind of rushed. Felt that they were kind of trying to do things just because they had to, so to speak. I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about, where they felt like they just tacked it on because they had to do a very important element of the story, when really, and I understand that it may have thrown off a lot of people if they didn't, or probably not, because a lot of people would have predicted it, but they could have left the Goblin scene out and just pushed it down towards the third film, instead of trying to kind of just tack it on at the end. Another thing I take issue with would be some of the lines of dialogue in this movie, and I know some people may defend this, but it got a little too comic booky. What I mean by that is, like, you hear these characters give these lines, and those lines may have worked in a comic where you have like the speech bubbles and everything, but when you actually hear them read aloud, hear them spoken out loud, they just sound kind of weird. And if the film really wanted to have kind of these really powerful lines and powerful moments with the dialogue, the cinematography didn't really allow for that. It didn't really complement it very well, mostly because they had to try having like these huge, almost Shakespearean, theatrical sort of lines, but the dialogue just does not match with the way those scenes were shot. That's mainly with the side characters. I mean, Spider-Man's one-liners I'm fine with because that's his character. He always makes jokes and cracks himself. That's how he keeps himself calm when he's dealing with situations where he could very well be killed at any given moment. And so, Spider-Man's dialogue was good. Like, the jokes he was making and everything, that was fine because that was part of his character. But just some of the speeches and just other stuff they had from the other characters definitely needed some work. All in all, while I enjoyed the film, I can't help but feel that they kind of had a bit of a trade-off between story and spectacle. I mean, the action and the battles and everything are a lot more bigger and more epic than the previous film. Not quite like Avengers or Man of Steel level, but it was definitely a case of they were more focused on the spectacle of the whole thing, and that did have a bit of an effect on the story, in my opinion. That's not to say that the story is bad, it just had some elements that either needed a little more work or just needed to be trimmed out entirely. So really, it's an entertaining film. If you're a fan of Spider-Man, this film will pretty much meet all of your expectations. It's not like better than you might expect, not worse than you might expect. I mean, we've seen worse, so really, all I can say is that I hope they don't try to bring back too much of the campiness with The Amazing Spider-Man 3, as I feel that that would be a step backward, because that's what made The Amazing Spider-Man work really well, is that it got away from some of the campy elements Sam Raimi had put in, but that's all I can really say about it. If you're a fan of Spider-Man, you've probably already watched it right now and are just watching this review to get my opinion on it, but it doesn't really exceed any expectations, doesn't really underperform, it's just right there. All of that said, I give The Amazing Spider-Man 2 a 4 out of 5. So that's it for this episode of Ronamy's Reviews. Tune in tomorrow for my review of Legends of Oz: Dorothy's Return. See you then.